My name is Marcus, and at 34, I built a successful tech company from nothing, but family always came first. That's why I didn't hesitate to help fund my sister Jessica's dream wedding, despite my concerns about her fiancé Bradley. I never imagined that after giving $50,000 for her perfect day, she would publicly humiliate me at a dinner party, calling me a loser in front of everyone. What happened next changed both our lives forever. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to make a difficult decision about a toxic family relationship that ultimately changed everything. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan shaped who I am today. Our parents, Tom and Linda, worked incredibly hard but always seemed to be stretching every dollar. Dad worked as a high school math teacher while Mom juggled part-time jobs as a receptionist and weekend shifts at a local bakery. We never went hungry, but there were plenty of times when new clothes meant hand-me-downs from cousins or neighbors. Jessica came into the world 2 years after me, and from the moment my parents brought her home, I appointed myself as her personal protector. She had these big, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her, and a smile that could light up our entire house. Our rooms were right next to each other, separated by a thin wall that became our midnight communication channel. We developed a system of knocks to signal when we wanted to talk after bedtime. Some of my fondest memories involve defending Jessica from neighborhood bullies who thought her vibrant personality and creative spirit made her an easy target. I remember one particular incident when I was 10 and Jessica was 8. A group of kids had taken her sketchbook and were playing keep away with it. I spotted her tears from across the playground and immediately jumped into action. I might have been smaller than some of those kids, but the fierce determination to protect my sister gave me all the courage I needed. That day, Jessica got her sketchbook back, and the bullies learned not to mess with the Wilson siblings. Teaching Jessica to ride a bike stands out as another pivotal memory. Our parents worked weekends, so I took it upon myself to help her master this childhood milestone. For weeks, I held onto the back of her purple bike with the tassels she loved so much, running alongside as she pedaled. The day she finally balanced on her own, her joyful scream of accomplishment made all the scraped knees worth it. Our late-night talks became more important as we got older. Lying in our separate beds, whispering through that thin wall about our dreams and fears. Jessica would describe the elaborate events she wanted to plan someday, down to the tiniest details of decorations and themes. I would share my ideas for computer programs or businesses I wanted to start. We were different in so many ways, but those differences made us stronger together. Everything changed when our parents divorced. I was 16, Jessica 14. The arguments had been building for months, tension filling our home like a storm cloud that refused to break. When they finally sat us down to explain they were separating, Jessica collapsed into tears while I sat there, stone-faced, already calculating how this would impact our daily lives. The divorce split more than just our family unit. Our emotional landscape fractured too. Mom moved to an apartment across town, while Dad kept the house but seemed to become a shell of himself. Jessica took it particularly hard, her grades dropping as she withdrew from friends and activities she once loved. During this time, I stepped up as more than just a brother. I became Jessica's constant, her emotional anchor when everything else felt unstable. I'd drive her to school in my beat-up Corolla that I'd purchased with lawn mowing money, making sure she had lunch funds and checking in throughout the day with text messages. At night, our wall-tapping conversations often ended with me sitting on the edge of her bed, reassuring her that some things wouldn't change, even if our family had. We made a pact during one of those late-night talks, pinky swears and all, that we would always be there for each other, no matter what life threw our way. Blood before everything else became our private motto, something we'd whisper to each other during particularly tough times. My entrepreneurial spirit emerged early. At 12, I started mowing lawns in our neighborhood, carefully saving most of my earnings while using some to buy Jessica ice cream or art supplies when she seemed particularly down. By high school, I'd graduated to fixing computers for teachers and neighbors, charging reasonable rates while building my reputation for reliable work. Jessica's talents took a different direction. She transformed spaces with her creative touch, turning her bedroom into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine using just thrift store finds and crafting supplies. For my senior prom, she decorated our backyard for pre-dance photos so beautifully that other students asked to use it for their pictures too. Her dream of becoming an event planner wasn't just a fantasy, she had genuine talent. Our personalities complemented each other perfectly. I approached problems methodically, breaking them down into solvable steps. Jessica saw the big picture, the emotional impact, the way things could feel rather than just function. When faced with challenges, I created spreadsheets and plans. Jessica created vision boards and found the beauty in difficult situations. College marked our first significant separation. I stayed at Michigan Tech, studying computer science while working part-time at the university IT department. The income wasn't much, but I managed to send Jessica a little money each month to help with her expenses at Grand Valley State, where she studied hospitality management. Jessica's college experience differed dramatically from my head-down, work-focused approach. She blossomed socially, joining a sorority and making friends with students from wealthy backgrounds. Her Instagram filled with photos at lakeside parties and weekend trips I could never afford to take. I was happy for her expanding horizons, even as I noticed the growing gap between our lifestyles and social circles. After graduation, I threw myself into the tech world with everything I had. While my college classmates balanced entry-level jobs with active social lives, I routinely pulled 16-hour days at a startup in Detroit. My apartment was barely furnished, just a mattress on the floor, a desk for my computer, and a coffee maker that worked overtime. Every spare dollar went into building my skills, taking additional coding courses, and saving for the future. My breakthrough came after 3 years of this grinding schedule. I developed an app that streamlined inventory management for small businesses, filling a gap in the market that bigger software companies had overlooked. The timing was perfect, coinciding with a boom in small batch manufacturing and artisanal businesses that needed exactly this solution. Within 6 months of launch, my user base grew from dozens to thousands, and by my 20th birthday, I was financially stable for the first time in my life. The success allowed me to move into a comfortable apartment in a revitalized neighborhood in Detroit. Nothing extravagant, a one-bedroom with large windows and a small balcony where I could drink my morning coffee. For the first time, I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand and a car that didn't make mysterious noises. These modest luxuries felt enormous after years of sacrifice. Meanwhile, Jessica's post-college path lacked direction. She graduated with her hospitality degree but struggled to find her footing professionally. She'd start jobs at event planning companies with enthusiasm, only to quit within months, citing difficult bosses or creative differences. Between positions, she'd return to our mom's place, promising each time that the next job would be different. During one of these between-job phases, Jessica met Bradley at a rooftop bar in Chicago where she was visiting a college friend. She called me the next day, breathless with excitement about this amazing man who had bought champagne for their entire table and promised to fly her to New York for their second date. My immediate internal reaction was caution, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to dampen her enthusiasm. Bradley Richards came from old money, banking and real estate primarily, and worked at his father's investment firm in a role that, from Jessica's descriptions, seemed to involve a lot of client lunches and very little actual work. He drove a Maserati, wore watches worth more than my first year's salary, and spoke constantly about his family's vacation home in the Hamptons and their connections to minor European nobility. From our first meeting, I noticed subtle red flags in Bradley's behavior toward Jessica. He'd compliment her appearance while adding qualifiers. "You look beautiful tonight, though you might want to consider growing your hair longer." He'd interrupt her stories to clarify details in ways that often made her sound less intelligent. He referred to her career aspirations as cute, rather than legitimate goals. Over the months they dated, I watched Jessica gradually transform. Her wardrobe shifted from creative, colorful outfits to expensive, branded items that seemed selected to blend in with Bradley's social circle. Her vocabulary adopted his phrases and judgments. Restaurants she once loved became too basic, and friends from college were mentioned less and less. The first time I met Bradley's family at their Lake Michigan summer home, their disapproval of Jessica was thinly veiled. His mother, Elaine, surveyed Jessica like she was examining goods of questionable quality. His father, Richard, barely acknowledged her beyond perfunctory greetings. His sister, Amanda, asked Jessica questions about her family background with the feigned interest of someone collecting specimens. That weekend included an uncomfortable dinner where Bradley casually mentioned my career in technology. His father perked up briefly, asking about my company, but quickly lost interest when he realized I had built it myself rather than joining an established firm. "The trouble with self-made businesses," he remarked, swirling his scotch, "is that they lack the foundation of proper institutional knowledge." Bradley nodded sagely at this, as though his father had delivered profound wisdom rather than thinly disguised snobbery. Throughout the meal, I caught Jessica watching Bradley's family anxiously, adjusting her posture and speech to mirror theirs. When his mother commented on the quaintness of growing up in Michigan, Jessica laughed along, distancing herself from our upbringing as though it were an amusing anecdote rather than our actual life. I swallowed my concerns and discomfort for Jessica's sake. Later that night, when we had a moment alone on the deck overlooking the lake, she asked nervously what I thought of them. "They seem very established," I offered diplomatically. "Are they making you happy, Jess?" "That's all that matters to me." She assured me they were, and that Bradley treated her like a princess. I noticed she didn't actually answer my question about happiness. After just 10 months of dating, Bradley proposed with a diamond ring that probably cost more than my annual income. Jessica called me sobbing with joy, saying she finally felt like she belonged somewhere special. The engagement party at the Richards Country Club showcased their world, champagne towers, live classical music, and guests who casually mentioned their recent trips to Bali or Davos. Watching Jessica navigate this event, I felt a strange mix of pride in her adaptability and worry that she was losing herself. When she introduced me to Bradley's friends, she emphasized my business success, as though trying to justify my presence. "Marcus's app is used by companies across the country," she'd say, squeezing my arm a little too tightly. Driving home that night, I couldn't shake my uneasiness. But I reminded myself that Jessica was an adult making her own choices. If Bradley and his world made her happy, who was I to question that? I promised myself I would support her decision, while remaining a safe place to land if things didn't work out as she hoped. The fantasy of Jessica's perfect wedding began to unravel almost immediately after the engagement. She and Bradley announced plans for a 200-guest celebration at one of Chicago's most exclusive hotels, with a reception overlooking Lake Michigan. The estimated cost made my eyes water, close to $150,000 for a single day's celebration. When I asked about their budget during a Sunday phone call, Jessica laughed it off. "Bradley says his parents always throw incredible weddings for their children. His sister's wedding was in the Hamptons with fireworks over the ocean." However, reality struck hard a month later. Jessica called me at midnight, her voice breaking as she explained that Bradley's parents had dropped a bombshell. They wouldn't be contributing to the wedding costs. Apparently they had concerns about the match, and felt that financial independence would build character in the young couple. "They're testing me, Marcus," she sobbed over the phone. "They want to see if I'm marrying Bradley for his money. But we've already put deposits down on the venue and the band. Bradley says his trust fund doesn't distribute until he's 35, and his salary won't cover this." I listened to her cry for an hour, my heart breaking for her humiliation. Bradley, she explained, was devastated and embarrassed but unwilling to scale back the wedding plans because appearances matter in his circle. They were caught between their financial reality and the social expectations of their world. The next morning, I checked my investment accounts and made a difficult decision. I called Jessica back. "I want to help, Jess. I can contribute $50,000 toward your wedding." Her grateful sobs made me feel simultaneously like the best brother in the world and a complete sucker. "This means everything to me," she kept saying. "Once we're married, Bradley's connections will help both of us. This investment in our future will pay off for everyone." I transferred the money that afternoon, telling myself this was my gift to her, security and happiness in her new life. What I didn't expect was how quickly $50,000 could disappear into the black hole of luxury wedding planning. With my funds securing the venue and catering, Bradley's mother Elaine suddenly took renewed interest in the wedding. She appointed herself unofficial wedding planner, critiquing and changing Jessica's choices with surgical precision. The flowers Jessica selected were too common. The menu needed refinement. The photographer Jessica researched for weeks wasn't the right fit for a Richards event. Each change inevitably added costs. The florist Elaine recommended charged 3 times Jessica's original choice. The refined menu required specialty ingredients flown in from overseas. The photographer came with an assistant and a lighting team. Jessica called me almost daily, vacillating between bridezilla moments of tearful frustration and desperate attempts to please her future mother-in-law. "The napkins have to be hand-embroidered with our initials," she explained one day, her voice tight with stress. "Elaine says anything else would look cheap." I tried gently suggesting alternatives. "What about focusing on what makes you and Bradley happy rather than meeting Elaine's expectations?" "You don't understand," Jessica snapped. "This wedding sets the tone for our entire future in Bradley's world. If it's not perfect, his family will never truly accept me." Bradley remained conspicuously absent from these conflicts. Each weekend found him golfing with his father and college friends while Jessica attended multiple tastings, fittings, and planning sessions. When she brought up her stress levels, he bought her expensive jewelry rather than offering practical support. As the wedding date approached, vendors began calling me directly when invoices went unpaid. Jessica had given them my contact information as the financial point person. Without telling her, I covered an additional $20,000 in expenses, upgraded linens, premium bar packages, welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, and the rehearsal dinner that Bradley had promised to handle but hadn't. 3 weeks before the wedding, I drove to Chicago for the final venue walkthrough. Jessica looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a constant twitch in her right eyelid. When Bradley arrived an hour late, reeking of expensive scotch from lunch with the guys, I had to step outside to keep from saying something I'd regret. That evening, Jessica and I sat in her apartment, while Bradley attended a client dinner. "Are you happy, Jess?" I asked directly. "Not about the wedding, but about your life with Bradley?" She looked startled by the question. "Of course I am. Bradley comes from an incredible family. Do you know they have dinner with senators and CEOs? Once we're married, all those connections become mine too." I noticed she talked about Bradley's family and their status, not about Bradley himself or their relationship. But pushing further seemed futile. She had committed to this path, and my role was to support her, not to force a reckoning she wasn't ready for. The rehearsal dinner at an upscale steakhouse brought both families together in an uncomfortable collision of worlds. Bradley's relatives arrived in designer attire, air-kissing and name-dropping throughout cocktail hour. Our parents, divorced but civil, seemed like visitors from another planet in their department store best. I watched Bradley's mother introduce our mom to her friends with the careful phrasing. "This is Linda, Jessica's mother," as though clarifying she had no actual relation to the Richards family. Our father received similar treatment, with Richard Richards, yes, that was actually his name, barely acknowledging Dad's attempt at conversation about the Chicago Bears. My rehearsal dinner speech emphasized Jessica's creativity, kindness, and our unbreakable sibling bond through difficult times. I saw tears in our parents' eyes as I recounted specific memories, but noted the polite, slightly bored expressions of Bradley's family. When I finished, Bradley's father stood and delivered a speech entirely about the Richards family legacy, mentioning Jessica only as the newest addition to our distinguished line. Driving back to my hotel that night, I wondered if I was the only one who noticed these concerning dynamics. The wedding train was moving at full speed, and all I could do now was hope for the best while preparing for the fallout I increasingly feared would come. The wedding day arrived with picture-perfect weather that seemed to mock my internal storm of concerns. The exclusive Chicago hotel overlooking Lake Michigan had been transformed according to Elaine Richards' vision, towering floral arrangements in white and gold, crystal chandeliers suspended over the dance floor, hand-calligraphed details on everything from place cards to cocktail napkins. Jessica emerged from the bridal suite looking genuinely breathtaking. Her gown, a custom creation with delicate beadwork and a cathedral train, transformed my little sister into someone who could grace the cover of a bridal magazine. When our father saw her, he burst into tears, whispering, "My little Jessie, all grown up." As I watched Jessica walk down the aisle on our father's arm, I felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Pride in the confident woman she had become. Nostalgia for the little girl who once needed my help to ride a bike. And an undercurrent of worry about the life she was walking toward. Nevertheless, her radiant smile as she approached Bradley momentarily silenced my concerns. Perhaps, I thought, love would be enough to bridge the worlds they came from. Bradley's vows focused primarily on Jessica's beauty. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were the most stunning woman in the room," he declared. "Your grace and elegance captivated me." No mention of her kindness, her creativity, her humor, or any quality that couldn't fade with time. Jessica, in contrast, spoke of partnership, growth, and building a life together, her words revealing the depth Bradley's lacked. My toast at the reception earned genuine laughter and tears as I shared stories of our childhood, Jessica's determination to create a neighborhood newspaper at age 9, complete with hand-drawn illustrations, her unwavering support when I was bullied in 8th grade, our late-night talks through the bedroom wall. I concluded by welcoming Bradley to our family while acknowledging the bittersweet nature of seeing my sister begin this new chapter. Bradley's father followed with a speech that felt more like a corporate address than a wedding toast. He spoke at length about the Richards family values of excellence and tradition, the impressive lineage Bradley carried forward, and how this marriage represented new blood for the next generation of Richards' achievements. Jessica was mentioned almost as an afterthought, valuable primarily for her potential contribution to family continuity. The reception progressed with the mechanical precision of an event where no expense had been spared. The 12-piece band played perfectly. The 5-course meal emerged from the kitchen with choreographed timing. The signature cocktails flowed freely. From the outside, it appeared flawless. Yet beneath the surface, I noticed strained interactions between the families, Bradley's increasing intoxication, and Jessica's tight smile as she worked to ensure everything met the Richards standards. 2 weeks later, Jessica and Bradley departed for their honeymoon, a luxury resort in Bali with private villa and personal butler service. This extravagance, I later learned, had also been partially funded by my earlier wedding contribution, as Bradley had redirected some funds towards securing the honeymoon of Jessica's dreams. While they were away, Bradley and Jessica's social media exploded with carefully curated images of paradise, infinity pools overlooking the ocean, champagne breakfasts, sunset yacht cruises. Each photo was more elaborate than the last, accompanied by captions about living our best life and forever starts here in paradise. Upon their return, they moved into an expensive apartment in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, a sleek high-rise with doorman service and panoramic city views. The rent, I calculated based on similar listings, must have consumed at least 70% of Bradley's monthly income, yet they furnished it impeccably with designer pieces and custom artwork. A month after settling into this new home, Jessica casually mentioned during our weekly call that she had quit her job at the event planning company. "Bradley says a Richards wife doesn't need to work," she explained with forced brightness. "I'm focusing on our home and our social obligations now." My own life continued its upward trajectory during this time. My company secured a major round of funding that expanded our operations nationally. I moved to a comfortable but modest house in a good Detroit neighborhood. Most significantly, I began dating Laura, a pediatric nurse practitioner whose compassion and authenticity provided a refreshing contrast to the artificial world I observed in Jessica's new life. The first dinner after Jessica and Bradley returned from their honeymoon revealed troubling changes in my sister. We met at an upscale Chicago restaurant where Jessica spent the first 30 minutes detailing every luxury aspect of their Bali resort. "The butler unpacked our suitcases and pressed all our clothes," she boasted. "Every morning, they decorated our pool with fresh flower petals in different patterns." Not once during this recounting did she acknowledge that her dream honeymoon had been partially funded by my contribution. When I brought up my recent business success, she nodded distractedly before returning to stories about the Richards family's upcoming charity gala. Jessica's social media presence transformed into a catalog of wealth signaling. Photos of herself in designer clothes tagged with brand names, elaborate dinner parties in their apartment, weekend trips to upscale destinations. Her former creativity and unique style disappeared, replaced by a careful emulation of her mother-in-law's aesthetic and interests. More concerning was watching Jessica adopt Bradley's judgmental attitudes. During a video call, she described a former college friend's wedding as tacky because they served beer instead of champagne. She referred to our childhood neighborhood as that place we couldn't wait to escape. When I mentioned Mom's new job at a local community center, Jessica sighed and asked why she didn't aim higher at her age. Meanwhile, concerning information about Bradley began to surface. A college friend who worked in financial services mentioned that Bradley had a reputation for cutting corners at his father's firm. "He shows up late, leaves early, and takes credit for other people's work," my friend confided. "The only reason he hasn't been fired is his last name." Jessica's calls to me gradually shifted in tone and content. Rather than our usual catching up, she began presenting problems with clear financial solutions. Their condo association had levied a special assessment. Bradley's car needed expensive repairs. They had an opportunity to join an exclusive country club if they could manage the initiation fee. Each time, I gently explained that while I wanted to support her, my business was reinvesting profits for growth, and I couldn't serve as their financial safety net. Her response to these boundaries ranged from guilt trips, "I thought family meant everything to you," to promises of future reciprocity. "Bradley's connections could really help your business expand," to outright anger. "You've become so selfish since making money." After these conversations, I often found myself staring at old photos of us as kids, wondering how we had arrived at this point. 6 months after the wedding, Bradley and Jessica hosted a dinner party at their apartment. The invitation arrived via expensive cardstock, specifying cocktail attire and a 7 o'clock start time. "Bradley's bringing home some important colleagues from the firm," Jessica explained when she called to follow up. "It would mean a lot if you and Laura could attend." The guest list, she mentioned casually, included a senior partner and his wife, 2 junior associates and their spouses, and Bradley's immediate supervisor. "And you guys, of course," she added, almost as an afterthought. I sensed this was more about presenting a successful image than genuinely wanting our company, but accepted nonetheless. Laura and I arrived precisely at 7, bearing a good bottle of wine and flowers for Jessica. The apartment looked even more impressive than in the carefully staged Instagram photos. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's glittering skyline. Custom built-ins displayed art pieces and leather-bound books that appeared never to have been opened. The furniture, all sleek lines and neutral tones, looked straight from a design magazine and equally uncomfortable. Jessica greeted us wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than Laura's monthly salary, air-kissing our cheeks and handing our wine to their server for the evening, a college student they had hired to tend bar and serve food. "Bradley selected the wines already," she explained with an apologetic smile that wasn't really apologetic at all. Bradley's colleagues arrived in waves of expensive cologne and subtle designer labels. The men immediately clustered around Bradley at the bar while their wives formed a separate group, evaluating the apartment with practiced smiles. I caught several glances toward Laura's dress, lovely but clearly not carrying the right labels, and the subtle raising of eyebrows. Dinner conversation revolved around topics designed to highlight status, recent renovations to vacation homes, children attending exclusive private schools, membership waiting lists for clubs I'd never heard of. Bradley dominated these discussions, dropping names and references with practiced casualness while Jessica nodded supportively beside him. "We're thinking of Aspen for winter this year," Bradley announced, though Jessica looked momentarily surprised by this apparently new information. "The Harrisons have offered us their chalet for January." Laura tried valiantly to participate, sharing a story about a challenging case at the children's hospital where she worked. The momentary silence that followed made it clear that genuine human experience wasn't the currency of this gathering. Bradley quickly redirected the conversation to a celebrity he had spotted at his gym. Throughout the meal, I noticed Jessica interrupting whenever I began speaking, as though afraid of what I might say. When I mentioned my company's recent expansion, she quickly added, "Marcus was always good with computers, even as a kid. It's nice he found a niche for himself." The pivotal moment came during dessert, an elaborate creation from a pastry chef Jessica had apparently hired specifically for the evening. Bradley, several drinks past professional, began telling stories about their respective backgrounds. "You should have seen Jessica's face the first time she visited my family's lake house." He laughed, refilling his crystal tumbler with scotch. "Like she'd walked into Buckingham Palace." Jessica laughed along, though I caught the tension around her eyes. "I was definitely not used to that world," she admitted. "And now look at you," Bradley continued, gesturing grandly around their apartment. "A perfect Richard's wife." The senior partner's wife leaned forward with practiced interest. "What was your family background, Jessica?" Before Jessica could answer, Bradley jumped in. "Classic Middle America. Dad taught high school, Mom worked reception. Very modest, very simple. Very real people," I interjected, feeling protective of our parents. Jessica shot me a warning look before adding, "We certainly learned the value of hard work." "And speaking of family," Bradley continued, his words slightly slurred, "Jessica and Marcus here represent the two possible outcomes of the same upbringing." He laughed at his own perceived wit. "Jessica recognized the opportunity to elevate herself when it appeared, while Marcus is content building his little app business and living in, where is it again? Detroit," I answered evenly, feeling Laura tense beside me. Bradley snapped his fingers. "Right. Detroit. Still driving that Toyota too?" Laura placed her hand on my knee under the table, a silent signal to stay calm. I simply nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jessica, perhaps trying to ease the growing tension or simply caught up in Bradley's world, looked around the table and said with a dismissive laugh, "My brother's always been the family loser. He might have tech money now, but he'll always be that awkward nerd from Michigan who doesn't understand class." The table fell silent. Bradley's colleagues looked uncomfortable, their wives suddenly very interested in their dessert plates. Laura's hand tightened on my knee. And Jessica, realizing what she had said, flashed me a quick smile that seemed to say, "You know I'm just joking." But I didn't know that. The words landed like physical blows, each one breaking something fundamental between us. This wasn't a joke between siblings. This was a public humiliation designed to elevate her status at my expense. I felt a strange calm descend over me as I methodically finished my dessert. The conversation awkwardly resumed around me, but I barely registered the topics. Laura maintained light social interactions while I sat in a fog of disbelief, reviewing every sacrifice I had made for Jessica throughout our lives, culminating in the wedding that had apparently purchased me nothing but contempt. The drive back to our hotel passed in heavy silence. Finally, in the privacy of our room, Laura exploded. "I cannot believe she said that about you. After everything you've done for her. That wedding, the honeymoon, does Bradley even know you paid for half their perfect day?" I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't think money is the issue here," I said quietly. "Something fundamental has changed in Jessica. Or maybe it was always there and I refused to see it." Laura sat beside me, taking my hand. What are you going to do? I stared at the generic hotel artwork on the wall, feeling the weight of a decision I never wanted to make. I need to talk to her. Alone. And then I need to establish some boundaries that should have been in place long ago. That night, I barely slept, replaying our childhood memories alongside the cutting words from dinner. The sister who had once been my closest ally now saw me as something to be embarrassed about, a remnant of a past she wanted to escape. The pain of this realization kept me staring at the ceiling until dawn broke over the Chicago skyline. The next morning, I texted Jessica asking to meet for coffee before Laura and I drove back to Detroit. She responded immediately with a cafe near their apartment, adding a string of heart emojis as though nothing had happened. This disconnect only strengthened my resolve for the conversation ahead. The cafe screamed expensive simplicity, minimalist decor, $12 lattes, and avocado toast that cost more than an entire breakfast back home. Jessica arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in workout clothes that probably cost more than my suit, her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. "Sorry I'm running behind," she breezed, air-kissing my cheek before sitting down. "Pilates ran long, and you know how impossible it is to find parking around here." She launched into chatter about the dinner party success, how Bradley's boss had been impressed with the wine selection, how the senior partner's wife had asked for Jessica's interior decorator's contact information. Not once did she reference her comment about me or show any awareness that something significant had fractured between us. After allowing this stream of superficiality to run its course, I set my coffee cup down and looked directly at her. "We need to talk about what you said last night." Jessica's expression flickered briefly before settling into casual confusion. "Last night? What do you mean? You called me the family loser in front of everyone. You said I'll always be that awkward nerd from Michigan who doesn't understand class." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that! I was just playing along with Bradley's jokes. It wasn't serious. Don't be so sensitive." The casual disregard hit harder than the original insult. "It wasn't a joke, Jessica. It was humiliating. And it revealed how you actually see me now." Jessica sighed dramatically, checking her Apple Watch as though this conversation was keeping her from more important matters. "Look, I've got brunch with Elaine in an hour. Can we not make this into a big deal? It was just dinner conversation." "Just dinner conversation," I repeated slowly. "Like how the $50,000 I gave you for your wedding was just a small gift." Her head snapped up, suddenly giving me her full attention. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been thinking about our relationship, Jess. About how it's become increasingly one-sided. I gave you $50,000 for your wedding. Did you know I actually spent closer to $70,000 total when all the extra expenses came in?" Her eyes widened. "$70,000? But the budget was $50. Budgets change when your mother-in-law demands hand-embroidered napkins and imported flowers. When the rehearsal dinner venue suddenly needs a premium bar package. When your honeymoon fund mysteriously needs supplementing." Jessica had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before her expression hardened. "Well, you're doing well with your company. You can afford it." This casual entitlement finally broke something in me. "That's not the point, Jessica. The point is appreciation. Respect. Recognizing sacrifice. I would have helped you regardless, but I at least expected basic gratitude, not public humiliation." "You're being dramatic," she said, lowering her voice as a nearby table glanced our way. "It was one comment at one dinner party. It wasn't just one comment. It was the culmination of how you've been treating me since you met Bradley. I've become an ATM and an embarrassing reminder of where you came from." "That's ridiculous," she snapped, but her eyes didn't meet mine. "Is it? When was the last time you asked about my life? My company? Laura? When was the last time you visited me in Detroit instead of expecting me to come to Chicago? When was the last time we had a conversation that didn't involve you needing something from me?" Jessica's face flushed. "So this is about money. You're keeping score now?" "This isn't about money," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. This is about respect and the fundamental imbalance our relationship has developed. I can't continue being your safety net while you and Bradley live beyond your means and treat me with contempt. What are you saying? Her voice had shifted from defensive to wary. I'm saying I'm cutting you off financially. No more emergency transfers when you overspend. No more covering Bradley's portion of shared expenses. No more funding the lifestyle that's apparently made you forget who you really are. The color drained from Jessica's face. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. And there's something else you should know. Bradley lost his job 2 months ago. What? No, he hasn't. He goes to the office every day. He goes somewhere every day. But according to multiple sources in the financial industry, he was let go for poor performance and unprofessional behavior. His father covered it up to save face, but he's not drawing a salary anymore. Jessica's hands began to shake. That's not true. Bradley would have told me. Would he? When was the last time he was honest about your financial situation? The cafe around us continued its morning bustle, customers ordering elaborate coffee drinks and typing on laptops, oblivious to the relationship imploding at our table. Jessica stared at her untouched latte, processing implications that were clearly terrifying her. When she finally looked up, her expression had transformed from shock to calculation. What if I apologize for the comment? We can move past this, right? Family is family. That's exactly my point, Jess. Family should mean more than what our relationship has become. I'll always be your brother, but until you recognize how your behavior has changed and the person you're becoming, I need distance. You're abandoning me? Her voice cracked, genuine emotion breaking through the polished facade for the first time. Just like Dad abandoned Mom? The comparison stung, but I held firm. This isn't abandonment. It's boundaries. Dad walked away from his responsibilities. I'm simply refusing to enable harmful patterns anymore. What am I supposed to do? Tears filled her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were from genuine distress or manipulation. If what you're saying about Bradley is true, then you have choices to make. Hard ones. About the life you want and the person you want to be. I love you, Jessica. I always will. But I can't watch you become someone who treats others as stepping stones. I stood, placing money on the table for both our drinks. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about all of this, I'll be here. But not as your ATM or your punching bag. Walking away from that cafe was one of the hardest things I've ever done. In my car, the emotion I had carefully controlled finally broke free. I sobbed like I hadn't since our parents' divorce, grieving for the sister I feared was lost to me and the relationship that might never recover. Laura found me there 30 minutes later, having walked from our hotel after I texted her. She simply held me while I processed the magnitude of what had just happened. You did the right thing, she whispered. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. The days that followed brought a barrage of communication from Jessica. First came angry texts accusing me of jealousy and sabotage. Then panicked messages when she apparently confirmed Bradley's employment situation. These evolved into thinly veiled attempts at manipulation. Mom's so upset about us fighting, and remember when we promised to always be there for each other? When these tactics failed, she shifted to bargaining, promises to be more appreciative, invitations to exclusive events, offers to introduce me to people who could really help your business. Finally came desperate pleas about their deteriorating financial situation. Throughout this emotional onslaught, I maintained my boundary with simple, consistent responses. I'm here when you're ready to talk honestly about our relationship and your choices. Friends reported seeing Jessica and Bradley still attending social events, maintaining appearances while their financial foundation crumbled beneath them. My mother called, concerned about Jessica's increasingly frantic behavior, but supported my decision when I explained the full situation. 3 weeks after our confrontation, I blocked Jessica's number. Not permanently, but as a necessary step to protect my own mental health from the constant barrage. I sent a final email explaining this wasn't rejection but a pause until she was ready for genuine reconciliation rather than financial rescue. The silence that followed was deafening, a void where my sister's presence had always been. I threw myself into work and my relationship with Laura, trying to fill the space left by this essential amputation. But at night, I still found myself reaching for my phone, muscle memory expecting the goodnight text that had been our tradition since college. 3 months passed without direct contact from Jessica. Through mutual friends and family, I received occasional updates that painted an increasingly clear picture of collapse. Bradley and Jessica had begun selling possessions, first luxury items like his watch collection and her designer bags, then furniture, and eventually Jessica's car. A college friend who encountered them at a restaurant reported that Bradley had grown sullen and quick to anger, blaming external factors for his professional troubles rather than taking responsibility. They were arguing about money at the table, she told me. Jessica looked exhausted and nothing like her Instagram photos. Through my mother, I learned Jessica had returned to work, taking an entry-level position at an event planning company. Ironically, the same field she had abandoned when Bradley proclaimed that a Richard's wife doesn't need to work. The job paid barely enough to cover basic expenses, much less sustain their luxury lifestyle. Bradley's parents eventually offered financial assistance, but with harsh conditions: move to a modest apartment they would select, adhere to a strict budget they would oversee, and Bradley would take a position at a family friend's company with close supervision. According to my mother, Jessica had broken down crying when describing these terms, calling them humiliating and controlling. Meanwhile, their carefully curated social media facade began showing cracks. Posts became less frequent. Photos were recycled from earlier, more prosperous times. Eventually, Jessica's Instagram profile, once updated multiple times daily with their glamorous life, went dormant for weeks at a time. The final blow came when they were evicted from their luxury apartment after falling 3 months behind on rent. They moved temporarily into a hotel while scrambling for housing they could afford on Jessica's income, as Bradley apparently remained unemployed despite his parents' connections. During these months of separation, I focused on my own healing journey. Weekly therapy sessions helped me recognize unhealthy patterns established in our childhood. My excessive responsibility for Jessica's well-being, her expectation of rescue, our parents' unintentional reinforcement of these dynamics through their own troubled relationship. Laura provided unwavering support through this process, her practical compassion balancing my tendency toward either problem-solving or withdrawal. Our relationship deepened through this crisis, strengthened by honest conversations about family patterns and boundaries. On a perfect autumn evening in Detroit, during a walk along the riverfront, Laura surprised me by proposing. "I don't want to wait anymore," she said, presenting a simple but elegant ring. "Life is too short and too precious to postpone happiness." Through happy tears I accepted, feeling for the first time that I was choosing my own future rather than managing someone else's. On my 35th birthday, an unexpected letter arrived with a Chicago postmark. Inside was a card featuring a simple drawing of 2 stick figures sitting on a rooftop, an echo of how Jessica and I used to sit on our garage roof as teenagers, talking about our dreams. The familiarity of her artistic style, something I hadn't seen since before Bradley, made my throat tighten with emotion. The letter inside was 5 pages long, written in Jessica's distinctive handwriting. It began simply, "I owe you an apology that's long overdue." What followed was the most honest communication we'd had in years. Jessica detailed her journey since our confrontation, the initial anger and denial, the painful confirmation of Bradley's deception about his employment, their financial collapse, and finally, her growing recognition of how she had changed. "I became someone I never wanted to be," she wrote. "Someone who valued appearance over substance, who treated the most loyal person in my life as an embarrassment, who confused price tags with worth. Losing everything material has been terrifying, but it's also been clarifying." She explained that she and Bradley had separated 2 months earlier after a brutal argument about finances. She had moved into a small studio apartment, and was slowly rebuilding her life on her terms. Most significantly, she had started therapy to understand her choices and patterns. "I'm not writing to ask for money or help," she emphasized. "I'm writing because I miss my brother, and I'm finally clear-headed enough to recognize the pain I caused you. I don't expect forgiveness immediately or maybe ever. But I wanted you to know I'm doing the work to become someone worthy of the relationship we once had." She closed by congratulating me on my engagement to Laura, news that had reached her through our mother. "She sounds like exactly the partner you deserve." I hope someday I might have the chance to know her better. I read the letter 3 times before calling Jessica. Our first conversation was awkward and halting, both of us carefully navigating this fragile new territory. We agreed to meet for coffee the following weekend when I would be in Chicago for business. The woman who greeted me at a modest cafe near her new apartment barely resembled the Jessica of the dinner party disaster. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect blowout, replaced by simple jeans, a sweater, and natural hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Most noticeably different were her eyes, clearer and more present than I had seen in years. Our reunion conversation covered difficult territory: her genuine remorse, my lingering hurt, the painful lessons we had both learned. She spoke candidly about her divorce proceedings from Bradley, who had moved back to his parents' lake house and was working at his father's firm under strict supervision. "I got caught up in a world that measured value by possessions," she explained, turning her coffee cup in circles. "I wanted so badly to belong somewhere impressive that I lost sight of where I already belong, with people who loved me for myself." When she asked about my company, she listened attentively to my response, asking thoughtful questions rather than waiting for her turn to speak. When she mentioned Laura, it was with genuine interest rather than comparison or judgment. As our conversation drew to a close, Jessica hesitantly mentioned that she was struggling to advance at her current job due to gaps in her resume. "The irony is that I actually love event planning," she said. "It uses my creativity in ways that trying to be a Richard's wife never did." Rather than offering financial assistance, I offered a different kind of help, a connection to a former client who ran an event planning company and needed someone with Jessica's skills. "I can introduce you, but the rest would be entirely up to you," I explained. "No special treatment, just an opportunity." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "That's actually perfect. I don't want shortcuts anymore. I want to earn things honestly." When she thanked me for the coffee, I surprised us both by suggesting dinner the following month. "Bring your portfolio," I added. "Laura works with several nonprofit organizations that might benefit from event planning help." Over the following year, our relationship slowly rebuilt on new, healthier foundations. Jessica secured the position with my contact through her own merits, and began rebuilding her career with a genuine passion that had been missing during her time with Bradley. She lived modestly within her means, finding authentic joy in creativity rather than consumption. When Laura and I married in a small, meaningful ceremony the following spring, Jessica attended solo, having finalized her divorce from Bradley months earlier. The toast she gave at our reception brought tears to everyone's eyes. "My brother taught me the true meaning of family," she said, her voice steady despite her emotion. "Not through grand gestures, but through consistent love, even when that love meant setting boundaries I desperately needed but couldn't see. Marcus and Laura, your relationship is built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine partnership, all the elements I now recognize as essential to lasting happiness." Today, a year after our wedding, Laura and I are expecting our first child. Jessica has been promoted twice at her company and recently started dating a kind, unpretentious architect who appreciates her creativity and resilience. Our relationship, while different from our childhood closeness, has developed a new depth based on adult understanding and respect. The experience taught me that sometimes love requires the courage to step back and allow natural consequences to unfold. By refusing to enable Jessica's destructive patterns, I ultimately contributed more to her well-being than any financial support could have provided. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were heading down a destructive path? or experienced the painful growth that sometimes comes from having everything you thought you wanted collapse around you? Share your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and personal growth, and hit that share button if you know someone who might benefit from this journey. Thank you for listening, and remember that true family supports growth rather than enabling harm.